Okay, so let's dive into a really fascinating puzzle, one that's got economists and business leaders scratching their heads. We're going to use Australia as our case study, but honestly, this is happening everywhere. We're spending record amounts of money on skills and training, yet productivity, the thing that drives our entire economy, is just flatlining. So why aren't all our best efforts paying off? Let's get into it.
This is the big question, right? I mean, think about it. Companies, governments, even you and I, we're all pouring billions into education, courses, and training programs. We're all trying to get better, to upskill. But when you look at the numbers, that effort just isn't translating into the productivity gains we should be seeing. So, what is going on here? What's causing this massive disconnect?
So to really understand this, let's zoom in on Australia's productivity puzzle. The country's own productivity commission has been sounding the alarm on this for years. And while it sounds like this high-level national problem, its effects are actually felt by pretty much every single person in the workforce.
And here's the core contradiction, the part that makes no sense. We've got skills shortages all over the place, yet we're spending more than we ever have on training. So the problem isn't a lack of trying or a lack of investment. The problem is that the investment just isn't delivering a return where it really counts, on the job. And that directly impacts everything, your wages, the country's economic health, and even how engaged and valued you feel at work.
Okay, so what's the actual root cause? Well, it turns out there's this fundamental, almost invisible disconnect between how we learn and how we work. For decades, we've treated them like two completely separate worlds, and that's where the whole system starts to fall apart. The source material we're looking at calls this a structural gap, and it's a perfect description. Think about your own experience. You go to a training day, or you click through an online course. Then you're expected to just go back to your desk and apply all of it perfectly. But the real world is messy. The classroom is not the workplace. And because of that gap, all those skills you learned in theory often get lost in translation the moment you have to put them into practice. This visual here just lays out the broken logic we've been following for years. We throw money at learning, hoping that it magically changes how we work. And if it does, that should generate some evidence of new skills, which finally should boost productivity. But look at that first link, from learning to work. It's so weak, so unreliable, that the entire chain just breaks. It all falls apart right at the start. And here's the really wild part. We have actually known how to teach people effectively for decades. I mean, research like Bloom's famous 2 Sigma findings proved way back that personalized tutoring and mastery-based learning work absolute wonders. So the problem was never the how-to of teaching. It was that providing that kind of one-on-one, expert guidance to every single worker was just way too expensive and logistically impossible to scale up. So let's just quickly break down what that research shows really works. First, you let people move on when they've actually mastered a skill, not just because a week has passed. Second, you give them guidance that's tailored to them, individually. And third, you create this constant loop of dialogue and feedback. Simple, right? But until very, very recently, trying to do that for an entire workforce was just an economic fantasy. But that old economic barrier, well, it's finally starting to come down. And that's all thanks to new digital systems and AI. They're making a completely new approach possible, an approach that finally closes that gap between learning and work. This is the missing link we've been looking for, learning in the flow of work itself. It's called a work-embedded capability system. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the name says it all. Instead of pulling people out of their jobs to go learn something, you push the learning into their daily tasks. It stops being this separate, special event and just becomes an integrated part of doing the work itself. So how does this actually work in practice? Well, your job literally becomes the classroom. You're working on real tasks for real projects. As you're doing them, you're getting this guided, adaptive feedback, almost like a digital coach. It's like learning to swim, right? You can read a book about swimming, that's traditional training, or you can have a coach in the water with you giving you tips as you're actually swimming. That's embedded capability. And as you do your work, you are automatically creating real proof of your skills. You only move on when you truly mastered it, not just because you sat in a chair for 8 hours. This quote just sums it up so perfectly. Learning becomes a byproduct of productive effort. You're not stopping work to go learn. You are learning because you are working. The two things completely merge, which makes the whole process unbelievably efficient. And remember that broken chain from before? Well, look at it now. This new system completely fixes it. The links aren't just there. They're strong. They're direct. Learning happens inside the work. The evidence is a natural output of the work. And so that final link to productivity, It becomes solid, undeniable, and best of all, measurable.
So, what does this actually mean in the real world? I mean, this isn't just a cool theory. The payoff here is incredibly tangible, both for people and for the companies they work for. This is where the productivity puzzle really starts to solve itself.
Let's just put the two models side by side because the difference is just night and day. Instead of being based on time, progression is based on mastery. The learning environment isn't some classroom, it's the actual job. And the proof that you've learned something isn't a multiple choice test, it's your real world performance. And maybe most importantly, the return on investment stops being this vague, fuzzy guess and becomes directly linked to actual business output. The benefits just cascade from there. People get good at their jobs way faster. Companies can make much better use of the talented people they already have. And, when employees see a clear path to getting better at what they do, they're way more engaged and way more likely to stick around. And all of that adds up to that holy grail, a clear, measurable return on investment. Now, we have to be really, really clear about what this is not. This is not about making learning easy or finding a shortcut. It is definitely not a replacement for good foundational education, and it is absolutely not a way to just hand out credentials without any real rigor. It's about maintaining incredibly high standards. In fact, this whole system does the complete opposite of lowering the bar. It actually raises performance expectations. The huge difference is it also removes those dumb structural barriers, that gap between knowing and doing that have always gotten in the way of people meeting those high expectations. It's about enabling excellence, not compromising on it.
So this all leaves us with one last big question to think about. For decades, the whole conversation about productivity has been obsessed with working harder or working longer hours. But what if the solution was never about more effort? What if it was always about a smarter, more integrated way of building our skills? Because by embedding learning directly into the flow of our work, we might have just found the key to finally solving the productivity puzzle.